There's so many different strengths and skills that we have and things that we're drawn to more. And just spending time discovering that is so valuable. I really wish someone had encouraged me to do this younger. Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast, where we talk about ideas for raising kids who become thriving adults, and we also talk about being thriving adults ourselves. I'm your host, Audrey Monkey. Here on the podcast, I share my experiences parenting 5 now adult kids and working with thousands more as a summer camp director for the past 4 decades. I'm the author of Happy Campers, and I love sharing encouragement and ideas for living more positive, connected lives. Topics I researched extensively for my master's in psychology and continue to explore today. I created this podcast as a place to share what I've learned and to encourage us all to raise and be thriving adults. Hey, Sunshine Parenting listeners, welcome to episode 185. Today, I want to talk about some myths that might be holding you back from living your best life. We're still in this Tough 20s series, so the audience I'm primarily thinking about as I talk today are young adults, but I also want to share that some of these myths I've only recently overcome myself, and I'm in my 50s, so it may be helpful for some other people out there too, even if you're not a young adult, to hear about some of these myths that I believe a lot of us struggle with, and they might be keeping us from doing some things that really could be amazing in our lives. So let's go ahead and get started with what I call myth number 1. And that's this idea that everyone, whoever everyone is, or certain people need to approve of my job, career, where I live, for it to be quote unquote successful. So this one is really hard because all of us grow up wanting to, please people, please our parents. We want people to be proud of us and think we're doing awesome. So it's really hard sometimes to separate what other people want for us, and often with very good intentions, and what we want for ourselves. So that's the myth. And I want to kind of share what I feel is more of the truth about this. The first thing is that if you are a young adult and you are thinking that something looks successful, you look at an older adult and you say, that's a successful person. Just be aware that some of the older adults that you think of as being successful are not happy with their lives. Some of them are too. So some of them who have maybe very, very prestigious careers love what they're doing. But there are also people with very prestigious careers who regret not doing something else that they were really interested in and wanted to try, but that didn't have the same level of prestige or income associated with it. Another thing just to think about is that you are unique. Every single person has just kind of this really cool, unique combination of interests and skills, and only really you can kind of discover what your kind of best fit is. And that's through a lot of trial and error. So you're not going to just like happen upon, the first job that you try and everything about it is perfect for you. That's never, well, in fact, no job will ever be all perfect. There'll always be parts that you don't like as much. So it's often sort of a curvy, broken, unclear path for most people, but it's really a good practice to keep trying to find your own unique path by chasing your strengths, your kind of flow state, and where you're really kind of finding some purpose and meaning, even if that's just in little pieces of some of the things that you're doing now. I think in one of the previous episodes, Charlotte said something about how joyful she feels now working in the preschool. Being a preschool teacher is certainly not a prestigious job in our society, but she is enjoying it and feeling a lot more purpose than she did in more of a traditional corporate career that she was starting. So that's one truth about this. So what you can do if this is something that you're struggling with, this myth that, I've got to do XYZ because that's what someone else has told me I need to do, or that's what kind of I perceive is valued in this world. What I suggest you do is spend a little bit of concerted effort learning about yourself. So I love all of the personality tests and strengths tests, and we pretty much in our family, everyone loves taking them and talking about them and doing them. So whatever you're interested in trying out, check it out. Check out the Enneagram, the VIA Strengths Finder. I think both of those can be taken for free online. There's also the Gallup Strengths. That's a more in-depth one that is also really good. Gretchen Rubin has an online quiz for what she calls her 4 tendencies. Each of these things are a little bit different, but they each give little clues about sort of how you operate. So what kind of structure is best for you? What kind of, is it more of a, like, will you thrive more in a job where you're interacting a lot with people, or one that's more analytical, where you really can like get things, organized and sorted, or, there's so many different strengths and skills that we have and things that we're drawn to more. And just spending time discovering that is so valuable. I really wish someone had encouraged me to do this younger, because even now, I'm still finding out like the parts of my job, why some have always been a struggle and others are just where I want to spend more time, or things that I continue to think I can do and keep trying to do and would be so much better to have someone else do. Anyway, so that was number one. The second myth that I think a lot of us fall for and that kind of holds us back from doing some cool things is that we have to make really big changes in order to reach our goals. Sometimes we think, just a really super basic example, a lot of us, want to get in better shape. And so, the typical thing is, you decide, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start working out more. And then you go and you spend an hour and a half at the gym and, really get sweaty and tire yourself out. And then you're like too sore the next day to go. So all the research has confirmed what you can read about or learn in the book Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes to his TED Talk, is that the truth is that the tiny, consistent habits are the way most people eventually reach their goals. And this is true for both vocational things and for physical things. So as an example, something like writing a book. If you read Stephen King's book on writing, he talks about just his daily consistent habit of writing. Now, he spends a couple of hours, but let's just say you're interested in doing more writing. Really, the start would be to open your journal and write for 5 minutes every morning. That would be a tiny habit. You could get even smaller than that and just write one sentence could be your tiny habit. But what ends up happening, and you know how it is, it's just this exponential thing. Cramming on something for a couple hours once in a while is not nearly as effective as just a slow, steady progression a little bit at a time. So what to do? For you, I would say, break down some really big kind of impossible seeming goal that right now seems so out of reach because it's just so hard, and break it into the tiniest step possible. So one example from my conversation with Owen last week was say there's something that you really want to learn about, and there's a really great book that's sort of the iconic book on that topic. What if your tiny habit is to read one page of that book, every day right after you brush your teeth, or, whatever it is, like just keep it in the bathroom. I mean, honestly, it could be while you're going to the bathroom, whatever. That would be an example of a tiny habit. It could be some huge book that's like 500 pages and you think, oh, I'm never going to read this whole thing. And you won't sit down and read it in one sitting or even a few. But what if you read one page for a year and a half and you would have read the 500-page book? So that's just one example of what you can do to kind of get out of this stuck point that you can get in of not getting started on something, a big goal that you have, because it just seems too hard. And when you've tried, it hasn't worked because you've kind of done too much. The third myth is that I need to start really big. Like I need to do something huge, like for my first job or whatever it is. Years ago at camp, I used to do this just kind of short life planning meeting with counselors who were interested. We would just do it over rest hour after lunch. And I had sort of a little guide that, some things that they could fill out. It was like a discussion. We had some questions. And really what it came down to was people had these really good ideas, like I want to write a book about this, or I want to start a nonprofit. Really cool, big, audacious goals and dreams, which are fantastic. Have big dreams. That's what changes the world, right? But the problem was they were so big that you don't really do them. You can't even get started, or you may not even have the skills yet to do whatever it is that you want to do. So, one example that from one of those life planning sessions that I vividly remember. Oh, so this is what to do. What to do for this example is to figure out what's the first very small step that you could take towards XYZ, fill in the blank. Starting a nonprofit to feed the hungry people in this particular city, or whatever it is that you want to do. What's the first really small step that you could do? So for something like that, it could be do a Google search of the nonprofit food service people in your area. That would be the very first step. That's it. Just research who's already doing this kind of work. And then you can kind of go from there, because the next step might be volunteering a few hours one time at one of the places to see how things work. So you can see how just that first step, though, making yourself get started on that. And I would say with this, it would be great to have an accountability buddy. So if you have a friend who also has this idea or dream, maybe you can brainstorm together and really kind of hold each other accountable that is this step small enough? And by when am I going to do this? And then circle back in a week. And then maybe you say, okay, we both did our first step. What's the next small step that we can do towards this goal? So that's just one example, but that has been really helpful for me when I get stuck on a goal or something that I want to do, is just to step back and just be like, okay, what's something super small that I can do to get started? If I'm writing something, that could be opening the file and putting the name on it. Could be step one. So I could have an article due and I would be like, I'm kind of stuck. I don't know what to do. So then I could just say, today my small step is to open the file and just jot some bullet points of like any ideas that I've had or the description that I pitched or whatever it might be. So that is your what to do for that one. This is another myth. Once I fill in the blank, then I'll be happy. So it is so easy to fall into this trap of saying, once I am not in college anymore and don't have all these finals and homework, then I'll be happy. Or once I get a job in the financial industry, then I'll be happy. Once I find that romantic partner that I've been looking for, then I'll be happy. Once I buy a house, then I'll be happy. Once I have a kid, I have a baby, then I'm going to feel so happy. Once I lose 30 pounds, then that's when I'll be happy. So, I mean, this is so pervasive. It's so hard not to think this way. We're kind of inundated with that message that we can't be happy right now because there's too many things wrong, or we aren't exactly where we want to be. But this, as I'm sure you've probably already experienced, just isn't how life works. The truth is that we actually miss a lot of the great moments in life when we're spending all of our kind of thoughts on this kind of thing out there in the future, kind of thinking that, I don't like my apartment right now, so I just can't stand it here. I just want to be in that house that I'm going to buy eventually. We waste a lot of time doing that. All of us do that. We spend too much time kind of in the future. It could be about a job advancement or whatever it might be, moving, even with really good goals, like, for example, running a marathon or writing a book. We think that once we've done that, suddenly we're going to feel something different. And the truth is that it does feel really good to accomplish things. And it's good to have those goals, because not only do those goals feel good in the moment, but they also are helping us build different skills that we want to have. So those are all good. But the truth is that sometimes we actually feel kind of bad after we reach the goal. There's even been research that when you are going on a vacation, a lot of the happiness about the vacation is before you go, the anticipating, thinking about it and talking about it. That's fun. Planning it can be fun too. So I think probably young adults are better at living in the moment than older adults are, but do that combination of things we were talking about. So yes, have things that you're working on and working towards, and try to enjoy the moment. My kids, there's a country song that we always listen to a lot called "You're Gonna Miss This." And it's so true. You're going to look back. I think a lot of people who are 20 or 25 look back and say, "Oh man, it was pretty fun being a kid. I kind of want to be a kid." And a lot of people in their 30s or 40s look back and say, "Wow, it was kind of fun before I had kids, having more free time to spend time with friends." So just so you know, that is part of life, is that things change, and they change in different ways. And it really is more about the journey and how your day-to-day life is going and how you're actually living. My kind of your to-do, or what to do next on this one, is figure out what is your current once I statement that you're maybe believing in too much. So whether it's about a job or a romantic partner or a house or whatever it might be, what is your statement? And what's something that you can replace that with in your thinking? Perhaps it's, what are 3 things that you're really enjoying about your life right now? What is it that about this current situation that's going to change eventually that you're really enjoying? And maybe focus on that. Maybe there's some parts of this time in your life where you have more time to spend more time with certain friends, or pursue a certain hobby, or whatever it might be. So just think about that, because that is one of those myths that I think, unfortunately, a lot of us get caught up in. Even older adults start thinking, well, once I retire, then I'll suddenly be able to travel and do all these things. And we all know the story that for a lot of people, it really doesn't work out that way. That, there's You don't know what tomorrow's going to bring or if you're going to be able to have these great things 5 or 10 years from now, but you do know that you have today and the people and the place that you're in. And so what is it that you need to be grateful for in this particular season that's going to help sustain you and keep you with a good outlook that helps you reach towards those goals in the future without putting too much weight on them being kind of the end all be all. All right. This next myth goes along with the one that I just covered to some extent. It's the I'll get to blank later when I have more time. So this you can fill in with anything Charlotte mentioned in our episode or one of our episodes that we all are given the same amount of time. And the truth is that regardless of the life stage you're in, your time will get filled. It gets filled by things that you really can't control and choose to some extent, but there's always some discretionary time, regardless of your life stage. But sometimes we're not aware of it because we default to using it for things that maybe don't leave us feeling super, like it makes us feel better or good. Knowing that truth, that we all have the same amount of time, I want to give you a couple of suggestions because these have been super helpful to me. One is recognizing that you have the same amount of time as everyone else. So if you see someone else who does something that you think, oh, gosh, I wish I could do that, figure out how you can do that too. How can you work whatever it is into your life? The other idea that I've been thinking about a lot, I got from Cal Newport. He has the Deep Life podcast and a bunch of books that I really like. But he talks about zero-sum budgeting. Instead of figuring out like how to squeeze things in between other things and on your complicated schedule, start with like a completely blank week. Like kind of look at a whole week because weekends tend to be different than weekdays. Look at your entire week and then say, okay, one of the things I want to prioritize is reading for 10 minutes or whatever it might be. Put that on your calendar. Put that in first. You want to have time to have an hour-long phone call or FaceTime with your best friend who's somewhere else. When are you going to do that? Put it on your calendar. Prioritize it. If you want to start exercising, put it on your calendar. Put it in first. So by putting in the things that you want, obviously you also have to put in work, class, other responsibilities. They need to go on there too. So I guess those go on first. And then you start putting in these other things that you want to do, maybe that you haven't felt like you've had time to do. Also put in the sleep, like approximately like where you're going to get that sleep in. And maybe just try that out. Just see if for 1 week, if you just sort of put in the things that maybe someone else is doing that you want to be doing too, or just make time for, it could just be more time with friends in person, like some of the things Owen was talking about. Maybe you just want to, every Wednesday meet this one friend for lunch in person or something like that, or meet another friend for a walk. Or it could be that, you want to go for a hike on Saturday morning or whatever it might be. Put it on there and then you'll get to it. So that's the thing. You probably won't get to it later if you're not getting to it now. So if you think that, once you're working full time or once you have kids or once you fill in the blank, you'll have more time, you won't. You'll still have the same amount of time and you'll still have to make choices and prioritize some things over another. So that was sort of my last point, but I had one additional kind of idea for you that is kind of like it's always been important to me and something that I've put a lot of thought into. But so you can make time more meaningful and things more memorable by putting a little more effort into it. So Laura Vanderkam calls it effortful fun. Owen talked about some effortful fun last week in the episode when he talked about going surfing with a few friends. That takes more effort than sitting on the couch and playing another video game. It takes more effort to coordinate when you're leaving, get the car, drive somewhere, check out the waves, whatever it is. It takes a little more effort, but that day surfing is going to be more memorable than kind of doing the same thing that you've been doing. So anything that you do that's a little bit out of your ordinary thing has this power. There's a book that I love called The Power of Moments. And I think it's Chip and Dan Heath wrote it, but I'll put a link to make sure. But it is so powerful in the way it talks about how much we remember more things that are unique, things that are kind of like milestones or remind us of something or an event. So I encourage you to think about, for you, what would look like effortful fun or moments that you know you'd remember and feel really good about later. So those are just some kind of tips that I wanted to share this week, really kind of based on things that, again, I wish someone had told me when I was younger, because it's taken me a long time to sort of learn those over the years. And now that I've learned them, really want to share them and get it out to more people so you don't have to struggle through the same things that I did. I had one more thing in my notes here that was out of order, and so I think I will just cover it. It goes back to when we were talking about the tiny, consistent habits. And with that, another aspect of, I know tiny habits are often you just like you do a little thing after something else. That's kind of how tiny habits work. So you read a page after you brush your teeth or whatever it might be. Another really something that's been helpful to me, I learned in the books, there's a whole series of books called The Miracle Morning. There's also Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and he talks about first things first. I know for me, and I think it may be for most people, that if we really want to do something like every day, a habit, it's most likely to happen if you do it first thing in the morning. So I did not practice this for a lot of my life. I know as an adult, I really wanted to exercise every day. And most days I'd put on my exercise clothes. But if I did not do it first thing, I would get started on work. I would start driving kids places. I would not end up doing it. And then I would just end up feeling kind of gross because I had never showered and started my day. So now I finally learned, and it's only taken me until I was about 50, that if I'm going to exercise, I'm doing it first. So I have kind of a morning routine, and it doesn't actually have to be a super long exercise. I just sort of have in my mind, it's like a 20-minute minimum, and it could just be a little walk or whatever. Sometimes it's longer. But I want you to think about, that's another kind of thing that you can think about is, what are things that you want to do every day that maybe you haven't been doing? It could be a friend that you want to text, or it could be something you want to read, or it could be exercise, or it could be preparing your lunch for the day. I don't know, anything at all. But just remember, if it's something that you want to do every day, you might want to consider starting your day with it, because once your day gets started, other people start asking for your time and it gets a little harder. Anyway, that's just a big download of some of Sunshine's ideas that could be helpful as you're a young adult, or maybe even as you're an older adult. So thanks so much for listening and to listening to this series. And I'm going to add onto the survey just a place for comments if you don't have a question. But I would love to just hear any feedback that you have about the series so far, and any topics that you would like to see covered more in the upcoming interviews and episodes. Thanks for listening, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. As always, you can find notes and links in the show notes and at sunshine-parenting.com. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate you either sharing it with a friend or giving Sunshine Parenting a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. I also invite you to read or listen to my book, Happy Campers: 9 Summer Camp Secrets for Raising Kids Who Become Thriving Adults. It's provided encouragement and simple strategies for building character traits and social skills to more than 3,000 readers so far. Happy Campers is available as an audiobook and in print or digital wherever you buy your books. Here's to raising and being thriving adults.